Well, I'm Dee Swanheiser. I represent the Forest Working Group and Taking Action for Living Systems. And the update for the TALS group is that we are working with CLE, which is the group that the county paid to figure out what to do with the settlement funds of the PG&E settlement. And next year we will be having some type of convening, and I'm sure that it will be a small one. It's not like the conference that we're proposing to put together in April, but it will be, again, our goal is to find a governance structure that so everyone doesn't have to go for grants every other month, and that it's a coordinated and helpful to the administration side of our work, and also to find private funding to go along with the public funding, because there just is never going to be enough public funding, even though there is a tremendous amount, and I'm very pleased with that, but it's just not going to do it in the time frame that we need. So that convening is being organized, and you'll hear more about it. Soon I will send out what we call our pitch, which kind of is a 2-pager, I think, that describes more in detail those two: governance structure and the private funding investment side. And this is for 4 counties. So this is for Mendocino, Mendocino Lake and Napa and Sonoma. So we're excited. We're ready for the new year. That is for darn sure.
Nice, thank you, Dee. That's such important work, and I just am excited to see what happens with this group, especially as far as like governance and helping us kind of coordinate when we go for funding and helping distribute the private funding and all of that. It's super important. Like just as an aside, those same 4 counties are working on a incentives program for forest improvements called NBFIP, which I think all of you are familiar with. And it just kind of makes me think, like, we're already coordinating in a number of ways, including that one. And it's just maybe a good starting place, or we're already having conversations about how to get funding to landowners through that program. And I think the TALS group is just like super complementary to everything that people are working on already. So, well,
it certainly is intended to be that collaborative, partner, as well as with the North Coast Resource Partnership and others that are working on those scales. Certainly the key is not to be duplicative, but to be supportive and collaborative. So I just wanted to definitely bring that out as well. There might be one other thing. If I remember, I'll put my hand up.
Great. Thank you. Okay, next is Jill.
Sorry, I was poking up my fire. The big news from Gualala River Watershed Council is that only a year late, we're finally embarking on the Gualala River Collaborative Project with Sonoma RCD. So a few of you will be, I think Jason Wells will be in touch pretty soon about trying to draft you to start those meetings. In fact, as I'm looking at the names, it's a pretty good percentage of people on this call. So sometime early next year, instead of sometime early this year, there'll be some meetings started. And that's it from Gualala River.
We're so pleased and grateful to you, Jill, for keeping the north part of our county. And I think that you go also into a little bit into Mendocino, but anyway, it's just this wonderful piece of our fabric that we don't always have connection with, and you are that those threads. So thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Yeah, and the Guala River is actually the border between
That's right.
Sonoma
That's
and
right.
Mendocino County at the west end of both counties.
Nice, thank you, Jill. Next is Ryan.
Hey everyone. So we've been very busy lately. We completed a project along Seaview Road from Cruz Ranch all the way to our property boundary at Salt Point. And we also did a little bit of understory work on the Prairie Trail up to that upper prairie. That was contractor work, part of our early action funding that I think we received around 2020. So it's finally being implemented. We are continuing to work at Fort Ross Road, very slow process with all the down tan oak there. But between the CCCs and CAL FIRE, we're making a lot of headway, burning a lot of piles. If anyone is receiving any feedback on smoke from Fort Ross, please let me know, because we're burning piles there a lot. So I want to know if we're impacting anybody, especially in that general area. And then we're also, the past week and finishing tomorrow, we've had another contractor crew, Great Tree Tenders, working along Willow Creek Road at the very top of the Willow Creek parcel of Sonoma Coast. And so up to the gate at Willow Creek Road down to the first hairpin turn, we've been doing understory work there as well. And the idea is that we will be burning those piles, also prescribed burning off of those roads down into those drainages, into those watersheds as a good start, and also ingress and egress along certain roads that people will likely use. So we're doing a lot of that work. It's really expensive, but super, super great work. And I'm just happy to see that work get done and see what it looks like afterwards. It's finally happening. It's not just talking about it. So
Yeah, it's terrific. If any of you are getting any feedback of concern about what you're doing, I think it's important that we share that, like Pepperwood did a few weeks ago on the concerns of their community neighbors about their burning. I think it's really important that we know about it, understand it, because it could have ramifications that we will start to need to, monitor more closely. So I just hope that we do share that. Thanks.
yeah, and I've been out there, well, especially at Willow Creek, I've been out there a lot, and in general, everyone has a pretty good, like, positive feel about it. They're like, oh, cool, State Parks is doing something. It's very exciting for them. But the negative comments I have heard is like, well, the chainsaws are loud as I'm hiking on this trail that's a public trail, which I totally understand. You don't go hiking to listen to chainsaws ripping in the distance, right? So there's that issue, but that's something you can control.
Mhm.
You can manage that both with notifications and just telling the crew, hey, if people are hiking by,
Mhm.
just shut down your chainsaws for a minute and go pile or something. Just try to be considerate of the public. And then the other thing right now, because the roads are fairly wet and a lot of our roads aren't well maintained, we're dealing with a lot of rutting from our just general vehicle traffic on roads. So we're dealing with that too. But these are all public things that I know a lot of private landowners just don't have to deal with random people walking through their projects, but it's something to think about because people will bring it up.
And we can bring it in the chat if people, think that would take too much time out of your reporting. But I just think it's important to have us all know. Thanks.
I also have a question for you, Ryan. How are you guys planning on maintaining that work along the road?
Burning it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I think the initial investment in all the manual work with, I think it was about 28 people with chainsaws and hand tools and piling, like it costs a lot of money for the initial investment, but now we should be able to prescribe burn it. We have lines beneath those areas. We'd like to go as big as possible, but like everything else, we have to start small. So yeah, I think the other possible strategy could be to use herbicide, but I think we all know that like that's not necessarily something that people are going to be comfortable with, and on such a large scale, it just doesn't seem feasible to me. But I'd rather just use fire.
All right, cool. Let us know how it goes. All right, and next is Kim. No, Kim, you are on mute.
Sorry, I was multitasking. Come on, guys. Good morning, folks. It's great to see everybody. I've been working a lot of different things. I think last time I reported out that I was going to have a presentation to the board on December 13th that essentially got bumped till January 10th. And so I really encourage you all to participate in that. We'll be basically presenting the advances of the Vegetation Management Grant Program, give you a sense of how we hope to spend funding for next year as far as a new cycle of grants, talk about essentially how we have tried to address the original CLE report that was submitted and approved by the board in 2021, and what advances we've done there, and what our recommendations are going forward. So it does touch on the governance question that Dee and her team are working on, specifically for Sonoma County, but doesn't give any recommendations as far as what kind of structure we would propose, but just a way in which we would try to address that over the next couple of years. But I encourage you all to participate in that and learn more about what we hope to do from a county perspective, and how we hope to spend the funding that is currently under the Vegetation Management Grant Program and the ad hoc for, we're calling it the Healthy Forest Ad Hoc. That was what was asked to address these things. The other thing I wanted to report out on is a request that I got about 2 weeks ago to attend a meeting 2 weeks ago Friday, which was the Rural County Representatives of California and the California State Association of Counties had gotten together, had basically been fielding many different complaints about PG&E vegetation treatments in their counties. And so the RCRC and the CSAC asked for a meeting with the PG&E brass that were responsible for vegetation treatments to understand what, to basically voice their complaints that they've been hearing from lots of their constituents. And I was asked to attend on behalf of the county, and it was an interesting meeting. It was like over 50 folks that were there representing different counties. Mostly it was all Northern California, where PG&E is really most active, and very rural counties all the way to the Oregon border and out to the Nevada border. And I think it was just an opportunity to basically let the PG&E brass know that we are not satisfied with their work or the work of their sub-consultants, and the disconnect that is often experienced by landowners who either want to retain trees or wood or trees that have been felled on their property or removed. A lot of things that were raised during this discussion. And so this group submitted a series of recommendations to PG&E, and it sounds like PG&E is going to be responsive. They presented a short presentation about how they intend to improve communication and have points of contact per county, so that at least the elected officials, when they get a complaint from a constituent, knows how to move that up through the food chain to PG&E, so that they're more responsive, and that they are trying to be have a better control of their subcontractors. So I think that is seemed to be like the universal comment from the folks from many counties. It's just like PG&E doesn't know what their contractors are doing. Sure, they might have a great scope of work, but it wasn't being applied on the ground, or it was being applied in a way that was overly aggressive, or ways that were being aware of what the landowner wanted. And so I thought that was a pretty resounding message. It was an interesting conversation. My role is basically to report out to our county elects, and so I'll see if I can share more information about that to y'all. So yeah, that's probably good for me today.
I had my hand up. I don't know how it got down, but Kim, how is the county and this ad hoc group planning on finding some ideas about governance? Are they going to have some public input? And do they have a timeline? You said something over the next couple of years. I'm really pleased they are doing that, and that they haven't decided on the structure, but they're going to. And so I wonder how they're going to.
Absolutely no public comments. Just kidding. I just want to make sure you guys are
April
listening.
Fools isn't happening.
Yeah, right. I'm the only April Fool in the room right now. So that's a great comment, Dee. I think without spoiling the presentation on the 10th of January, but essentially what we have found is we've been the technical advisory committee that I originally created for us to do a better job on the veg management grant morphed into being able to support the ad hoc to try to develop these strategies per the CLE report. And so, but that technical advisory team didn't have the expertise to really think through what types of organizational structures should be in place. But we're at this really interesting point where we have the PG&E funding, we have the FEMA grants starting to roll. We're getting some great feedback and getting real experience on the ground about how to use these funding mechanisms. And so our proposal, and try to keep this under wraps because we were trying to give this to the board and allow them to make the ultimate decision. The ad hoc really wants to create another technical advisory committee that would focus on organizational structure and that long-term sustainable funding, but do it over a period of time where they really take into account the work that's being done right now with the vegetation management grant. And as we roll into the FEMA grant, which is the FEMA grants are going to be an 18-month process to really get those on the ground, but the impact could be really significant when we come to the point of how we're doing the work on the ground. So that's our thought, is that we tap the brakes a bit on the organizational structure, not jump into this idea of let's do the Marin method, let's do the Napa County Firewise, but really let's be very thoughtful about what Sonoma County needs. The work in Marin is very different from what we experience because they have so much public land. So now in our world, we have some infrastructure that's being developed with the FEMA funding and what Permit Sonoma is able to create. So let's try to learn from those lessons and create an organizational structure that works and is taking full advantage of what the county has to offer, as well as those layers of support through the RCDs and the NGOs that are all involved with this. And so you guys are absolutely part of this program, and we want to get that feedback. So please stay tuned, and if you can, participate on the 10th of January for that discussion.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry, guys, that was a long report out. It was because of Dee. She asked the question. Just kidding. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kim. That's awesome. All right, and Jason's next.
Jason Mills this time, or Jason Mills on the screen? What's up, everybody? Happy holidays. It's been a while. Um, I've been doing what I do, everything within my power to help our natural lands. And that included advocating for beneficial practices and protocols for fuel reduction within oak woodlands at the CNPS conference down in San Jose last month. And it, I think, went really well. I was able to kind of convey the BMPs we're using for the project through Ag and Open Space out on Saddle Mountain. They're kind of unique, tailoring fuel reduction for a post-fire site. But it's amazing the amount of fuel we're able to get into piles without killing a single living plant and reducing, a ton of flammable biomass. So that felt really good, and I'm looking forward to doing what I can to help get some of that content into the Forest Working Group conference coming up in April, I believe. We've been talking on planning for that conference, so that's another exciting thing coming down the pipeline. Crews out there planting, right? And I always kind of feel like, is that even appropriate for me to discuss, sinking good natives in the ground for habitat restoration among a forest conservation working group? And I think it is. I would be very happy to say I'm somewhat validated in finding that out, because thank goodness the VTP, right? CAL FIRE VTP had a great workshop through San Luis Obispo. Adriana, your folks, I believe, put together this great workshop on breaking down the VTP process and essentially streamlining CEQA to enable fuel reduction work to happen on the ground. And I was thrilled to see there's a bunch of practical steps to take along the way. And when you're categorizing your project, one of the top categories is called ecological restoration. It comes before WUI. I'm like, oh, wow. Now everybody at least has to think about it, right? Do I get to check that box? Is that a box that I even thought about? So just thrilled it's there. And then started to kind of get more into it and found out essentially, there's a bunch of public forum discussions, which is great. So through all these projects, you're going to need somebody to facilitate all that, as you guys are discussing. And then there's, you find the area you need to be treated. Now, who's going to start writing up all those plans? Does it have to be a forester? Does it have to be a registered professional forester? Turns out, no. As long as you're not harvesting timber, you don't even need an RPF. It can be any land manager or ecologist. So this kind of really hit me. I'm like, wow, okay, great. We can start planning these fuel reduction projects and basically breaking up huge acreages into management units. Now, whether those management units need new roads to get in there, that might require a forester. Then in that area, you then have a bunch of class 3 streams. Those all need to be delineated as sensitive habitat areas. That's a great thing for an ecologist to get in there to start learning about the land. Then after that, now you're getting into invasive plant populations and rare plant populations within that area. Now, is that something that even falls within a forester's wheelhouse? If so, I'd like to meet them, right? If there are foresters out there who know how to deal with invasive plants, that's awesome. If not, let's get some ecologists out there to help advise the foresters. And then when it came to the rare plant surveys, when are these being done? How often are they being done? What does this information even reach the contractor on the ground? Turns out, yes, it does. You flag it all as sensitive habitat, and the contractor is therefore to have a flagging key. Oh, do I cut there? No, I don't. I stay out of there, right? But here's the loophole. Now, what if there is some rare plant population that wasn't found through the rare plant surveys? And now the contractor just knows, oh, that's a stay out zone, but I'm free to masticate this entire population of rare plants that wasn't determined in the initial survey work, right? Yikes, that's kind of an issue. So I think it's the building blocks are there. The structure is there and it seems pretty sound. Now, delivery, right? How are we going to actually deliver and see it through? And that's my stake in this whole conversation. So it's just been an exciting thing to be a part of it. And, you know, getting down to what Ryan was just mentioning, yeah, we don't want to be dousing our lands in herbicide. The 5 treatment types were mechanical, manual, fire, chemical, and and grazing, right? So that's how you manage vegetation. Those are your tools. Dousing chemicals, oh no, 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 no. But does it make sense to do a cut and paint application for every single tree we know is going to resprout vigorously when we cut it down? Probably. Having a qualified applicator out there to cut the total chemical into a hundredth of the percent would sure be a wise thing if it's going to save hundreds of thousands of dollars of contracting funds to go back and retreat all those areas, as we've seen happen with Tan Oak and Bay across the board. And then not to mention all of the invasives, the acacia, the ukes, big money to take them out. And then they're all going to bring anyhow.
Jason, I've just been preparing one regarding herbicide application, and so I used a lot of the words targeted and sparingly.
Nice.
And it's really difficult because, you know, the acreage I have is very large, and so if someone were to look at it, would say like, "Oh, you're applying herbicide on 10,000 acres," which to anyone that would be like, you know, what are we doing, spraying Agent Orange again type of thing. But really what you're doing is you're analyzing all those acres for using that herbicide. It's just trying to change the visual of what it looks like to someone reviewing the document, which that's what I'm struggling with right now is
Yeah.
you can't say that you're going to herbicide that many acres because that's also not what we're doing, but
Yeah.
the document shows it as that.
And it sounds like you're making all the right moves with trying to integrate future fire. So that's the path where we really want to get. But you know, using the herbicide effectively is pretty key. And you know, I have been seeing through this work on the ground. I've seen it done well. I've seen it done not so well. I'll continue to do everything I can with my team to make sure we're doing it well. And we are expanding. We are hiring our first graduate from the Santa Rosa Junior College Boot Program in January.
Oh,
So we're
good.
working with the Cs, we're working with Circuit Rider, we're trying to gather all the local labor resources to do informed work on the ground. And
You know, that sounds like something that the media should be covering, jobs, you know, anyway, it's just something that we should not forget to contact the media when we have something great to share.
and Kim has been advocating, you know, getting the conversation in the mix. Can we talk about the labor force? So, you know, kudos to everybody for all the work they've been putting in, and just a big old happy holidays. Hope to make it tonight. And great to see you guys.
I really like that update, Jason. It was like one part update, one part just like philosophical musing on the state of forestry.
Good old mishmash.
Bring more of that tonight. All right, thank you very much. And Devin.
Hi, everyone. It's fun to work with the great tree tenders and Ryan. They're so impressive. I was having a conversation last night about how impressed they are to work with. Last night we had our community Firewise meeting for the Porter Creek area. We're in the process of getting a Firewise community kind of built out. We just sent out our surveys, and Marika from Fire Safe Sonoma, Chief Tuberville, and Chief Nichols were all at the meeting as well. So that's exciting to just kind of see where the Firewise communities are growing, and kind of all connecting together. In terms of work on the ground at Pepperwood, we've been burning a bunch of piles and planting a bunch of native grass plugs into those old burn piles, which has just been a super successful process for us, helping to reduce those invasives that come into those really hot burn scars after pile burning. And then this Sunday, we are hosting one of the Trex events to do a bunch of pile burning out to our oak woodlands, which was a project that was piled about 3 years ago. So I think this year we'll be able to wrap up the 150 acres that we treated and piled. So with our limited team and staff, it's taken about 3 years to actually burn off all those 2,000, 2,000 to 3,000 burn piles. So excited to finally get all that fuels reduction done. And we're also working with CAL FIRE to get the next round of VMP process kind of going. So looking out for the next 3 years, we've completed our surveys, and with Tim Holiday moving on, it's been a little bit of a juggle. CAL FIRE not really having a forester, but it seems like Marshall is kind of taking the reins on a lot of the VTP VMP projects, which he's the person that gets things done. So it's a pleasant to work with him. Yeah, and then speaking of invasives, I've just been analyzing all of our invasive data for the last 3 years, and writing out a report for some funding we got from CDFW. And it is, we had a substantial downtrend for a couple years, and then this year was an uptick. So as Jason and I'm sure many of you know, the invasive battle just keeps going, but you gotta stay on it. And yeah, that's all we have going on right now.
Thanks, Devin. Always interesting to hear what's going on over there. You guys have so many different initiatives. It's crazy. And I can't believe it took, I mean, 3,000 burn piles is just amazing. So doesn't matter if it takes you 3 years or how long it takes, but that's an impressive number.
Yeah, and that was all done by great tree tenders as well.
Nice. Yeah, I hear they are super impressive. All right, thank you. And Judy.
Okay, hold on. Okay. Well, right now we are working on 2 things. We're trying to get our Fort Ross Road project wrapped up. We have about 5 or 6 days of work. We have a couple of irons in the fire for funding to finish that project. It's been great. It was great during the summer, but during the winter, it just feels so much safer driving down that road without, fear of those branches and trees falling every time there's a big rain. The road itself is pretty clear. There's not a lot of debris. Whereas before it was a mess. You took your life into your hands when you were driving during a storm. So we're trying to finish that. We're also getting started on our CAL FIRE grant on the VTP. We got an NCRP grant, and we're working with Matt Green and Mark Andre in Arcata. We met with Chief Turbeville and Ben Nichols, Chief Nichols last week. Curleone was there also, looking at our projects going forward. We've been planning for these next CAL FIRE grants over the past year. We've been meeting quarterly with landowners, with Chief Turbeville, with people coming in, looking at where we want to go next, phase 2. So I know they just announced the wildfire prevention grant. And so we're looking at our priority roads, which will be phase 2 of what's being funded now. And we're also working on forest health. And we have another group of people we're working with, pulling that together, though Mark, Andre, and Matt Green are our technical advisors for both. We're in touch with Jason Wells about the coastal PWP. And we'll be reconnecting with him again after the first of the year, looking at how we can use that as well. I too was at that VTP webinar last week, the week before, whenever that was, and learned a lot. And now we're trying to figure out our VTP. We learned a few things at our meeting last week, whereas we wanted to do the whole area. We're realizing because we have so many individual landowners that if we put a VTP on their project, on their property, what is that moving forward if it's outside of our project area? So we're looking a little more closely at that, and how we can actually get started on our CAL FIRE grant while the VTP is still being planned for the areas that we're going to use. Can we apply for notices of exemption? How can we work with our volunteer road groups? We have, we have several amazing road groups here that volunteers on all the ranches. And when I refer to the ranch, when I talk about the ranches, I'm referring to we're working with the Muniz ranches, and then 3 ranches along Fort Ross Road, which is the Navarro Ranch, the Walla Ranch, and CV Ranch. We're working with Timber Cove as much as we can. We have issues going on there because a lot of that property is in the coastal zone. So we're trying to figure out how to bring this all in, all together, an organizational structure, not only for our individual and private landowners, but also bringing in our public landowners. And I know that Matt Green is talking to state parks. We're hoping to meet with you, Brooke, sometime soon to look at regional parks. And we have a meeting. I'm trying to schedule a meeting with Karen Gear about a planning grant from the Coastal Conservancy to look at pulling all of this together. We've done some outreach on the North Coast. We're working with Kashaya, with Richardson family, and so there are a lot of pieces, and we're looking at how do we shift from a project by project to a big landscape scale project. And that's where we want to, we did look at Mount Tam. We did look at some of these other great models, but they don't really apply to us. I mean, we're dealing with hundreds and hundreds of private landowners. Interesting, we were talking about maintenance, and we did a landowner survey in October. And it was just, I think maybe 10 questions, multiple choice. And then, what would you like to learn more about? And one of the top 3 items that I think was number 2 was herbicides. We have 2 HOAs on the ranches, on the subdivided ranches, and our HOAs don't allow for herbicide. But, we have a lot of landowners outside of the HOAs. And so that was a top, one of the top topics. The other is, individual landowners. For forest management planning, we're working with Fred Ufrat, and we've talked to Jill about partnering with us on doing forest management plans, landowner forest management plans. I know that there are, through UC Cooperative Extension, there are write your own forest management plans, but it's really hard to get people outside the area to move outside the area, up here. And so how can we bring that closer to home? So we've talked to Fred, I've spoken with Jill, and with Matt Green also. How can we do something similar here? And we're looking at that for our one of our forest health projects, along with a grazing school with Stephanie Larson, for small community grazers. How could, because it's too hard to transport livestock from, one area, one ranch to the next, but yet we have multiple small grazers on a number of these ranches. So how can we work with these grazers to just kind of expand their grazing operations outside their, their personal areas? And also, we have grazers, we have good grazers, we have some grazers that are a little irresponsible. And so you have a lot of different issues. And that's why we thought of the grazing school. doesn't have to be, a very long, but some kind of certification that we're talking to Stephanie Larson about. You attend the school, you do some classwork, you get some basics on range management, and then grazing your own grazing operation, and then creating a sustainable grazing operation within your community. So we're anxious about that. We're looking at, obviously, the burn plan for this area, because we have burns in our CAL FIRE grant now. So there's a lot of things coming up, and so in our effort to pull that together, we're going to apply for this planning grant, and we'll be reaching out to you. I mean, I've really found over the 10+ years that I have been involved doing this work, our greatest resource is the Forest Working Group. Everything we have done from day one has been utilizing all of the resources, the human resources, the natural, everything that is out there. We have gone to the Forest Working Group, and I think for us that has been the best path forward. And as we look at now this large scale planning on the North Coast, because we're working with landowners all the way up to the Mendocino border, and what's the next step there? And so I'm hoping, to also at this conference coming up, learning more. What we could. I looked at the agenda, and there, I think there's some. You have some good topics that we can learn from. One of the things that in looking at the agenda, I do think that I saw one of the gaps was landowner outreach, community outreach. I know we've had a number of people, and remind me of her name, who did she gave a great talk on landowner outreach. Was she with the Laguna de Santa Rosa? I can't remember right now, but because we're tailoring our outreach to these individual communities, but we're also trying to put an overall plan together here for the North Coast, and especially with this VTP coming up that we're working on. And I know that Matt met with the county the other day. I think Kimmy said you were in on that talk too, and we haven't had a chance to talk about it. Matt and I haven't had a chance. We won't meet until tomorrow morning. But the landowner outreach for the VTP is getting more complicated by the day, and so I'm anxious to talk to Matt again tomorrow, and then look at all of that, for all of the things that Jason, you mentioned from that webinar, of all of the things that you need to look at putting together that VTP and the PSA, and we've discussed a lot of that already, and bringing the landowners on board could be difficult because there's so much. It is so complex, and so anyway, that's what we're doing in a big nutshell.
Is that all? I mean, for crying out loud, what the heck? Judy, you got to start stepping up your game here. I mean, this is just ridiculous.
I know. I'm sorry. I hate to be such a deadbeat, but we are looking at expanding our board. So we're going to look also at what does, what is that? Where do we go with that? We've just increased our staff again. And so, yeah, we're growing, and definitely going through growing pains from a small little organization, an all volunteer organization, to this organization where we're administering about $1.5 million in grant money right now, grant funded projects. It was a leap from where we were as a volunteer organization to this organization that we are today, and where we're going. And so we're growing, we're talking to people, helping us with that, with that process. And so
Yeah, Judy, so amazing. I mean, you guys are, what you're trying to do is not easy, so it's gonna take a long time and a lot of work. And also it doesn't, like, there's no template that exists for this. So everything you're doing is trailblazing. Please let us know how we can help. And
I will. And, I will say in all of that, I managed to take off 2 weeks and go to Australia last month. And that was great. I mean, it was just stepping away from everything was just huge. And just getting my head back in place, back together and focused and organized. So
yeah,
thank you.
gotta do that. Okay. Yeah, I feel like I have a lot of questions for you personally because trying to help other communities do what you're doing, but it's kind of scary to like set them off on that journey knowing that there's no clear path. And I kind of want you to like do it first and then tell us how you did it. But that might take some time. All right, let's go to Raymond.
Hello, everybody. It's been quite a while since I've attended one of these. It's really great to hear, all the various things that are going on. So it's really great. I don't know whether or not Ellie or Caitlin have been sort of regulars in this or not, but I'm just going to kind of talk about the biochar program and what we've been involved with. We have been very fortunate to be involved in 4 different CAL FIRE grants, all having to do with one form of biomass utilization or another. We're working with on an emissions grant with regarding doing the really great emissions testing of the flame cap kiln, the ring of fire kiln, conservation burn piles versus regular burn piles. We got the Forest Service Fire Science Lab in Missoula, Montana, that's going to be doing the testing both in Missoula at their lab and in the USAL Forest, working with the USAL Redwood Forest Company. And so we're really hoping that the data from that will really be able to show not only the particulate matter that isn't being released, but possibly methane and other sort of point source pollutants. So anyway, we're also working on a Bay Area biochar marketing grant with a company called Earth Foundries. We're focusing on 3 different sort of downstream uses for biochar, which would be composting, manure management, and stormwater filtration. We just had a great meeting yesterday with a poultry farmer and a dairy farmer in Sonoma County, and we're going to be working with them on various aspects. We're working with 2 tree care companies, one a very large one in Sonoma County, on a feasibility study for them to install a pyrolysis or gasification unit, possibly in Windsor, but also possibly working in conjunction with the Mendocino Redwood Company up in Ukiah, and placing it there, and sort of demonstrating that a lot of the biomass they're pulling out of Sonoma County, Lake County, can be upcycled into biochar. And then we're working on, we got a grant last year to purchase a biochar production unit of our own. We were trying to put it at Mare Island. Now we're going to be putting it at the Napa Recycling Center, which is a great location. They also do a lot of composting, so we'll be able to do some testing with that as well. We also are working with a company called Earth Foundries that we're working on a couple of these other grants. There's a large biomass utilization or a fuels reduction project at Chabot Regional Park in the Oakland Hills. There's 800 acres of eucalyptus there that they need to deal with. They're doing a short 80-acre fuels reduction project and then processing that material in RPF, Dan Falk's carbonator. Some of you probably know about that as well. So that's kind of an exciting project. They also recently, Earth Foundries, they went up to some county in the north and demonstrated the carbonator for PG&E. And PG&E was excited enough about it to want their CEO apparently to come and watch the process, and they're going to come to Chabot to do that. And of course, we're still doing our our field trainings. Just last Friday, we did a kiln and conservation burn pile training for Napa Green, and was at the Napa RCD experimental vineyard. So we're still working in that vein as well, training people how to burn, much cleaner, almost smokeless piles, using both the kiln and the conservation burn pile. So moving forward, we're hoping there's this new school greening project that CAL FIRE has come out with, and we're very excited about this concept called the tiny forest or the Miyawaki forest, and putting a lot of these sort of smaller forest areas into schools locally in Sonoma County and Sonoma Valley and elsewhere. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Could I ask a question or make a comment, Ray?
Sure.
I just wanted to thank you for the work you helped me with, because I personally have been developing a glossary of terms, because so many people and some of our really very wealthy donors really don't have the science behind, how to understand what's important to do. And so I'm trying to put it together in a form that anyone can understand, just even the word biodiversity, the word biochar, and that's what made me think of Ray, because I sent him my definition and he helped me rework it. And I also worked with the Laguna Foundation on the idea of a riparian forest definition. And I also asked the North Coast Regional Project to comment on a couple, and I'm going to be sending them around to several others of you for review before I would figure out what, to do with it beyond the few people I had decided I would make it for. But some people think, well, it might be a good thing for, a larger audience. So anyway, I just want to thank Ray so much for taking the time to work through my definition of biochar.
Thanks for that opportunity, Dee. I think it's a great idea, and I think the general public could really use some sort of a cheat sheet or something that defines a lot of these things, like what is environmental or ecological forestry, and all these other terms. So
there's so many. So thank you.
I like that idea too, Dee, and we can distribute it at the conference too. I think that's a good place to get that into people's hands.
Great.
Thank you so much, Raymond. It was really good to see you and hear all of that. It's incredible what you guys are doing. Please do keep us informed as you can. Thank you. And Carol Ann.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see y'all.
Good to see you.
And I just realized that I haven't had my noise. I'm the responsible party. I just want to give you a quick update on the CWPP and what's going on with that. It's getting there. I am more than halfway through with addressing the hundreds of public comments which we received on the document, and in the process of getting all those in there and then pushing it out to our steering committee for a final look-see on how comments were replied to throughout the document. Kim and a larger consortium of folks and I are all going to be, at this point, now that the document is in the final stages, we'll be diving in with both feet into creating the priority project evaluation and tracking tool, which is going to be the revised version of what last year was the project entry portal on the CWPP hub site. And what we're hoping to do with that, and this is going to take a lot of revision on the hub itself, is to create basically 2 buckets for projects to be entered. There'll be an easy bucket. I have an idea. I don't have specifics. I don't have CEQA. I don't have a budget, but I would like to do this thing in this area. So that'll be a pretty easy entry. Those will be evaluated for adherence to the identified priorities of the CWPP itself. And to some degree feasibility. One of the things that we can't do, so those projects, they'll be entered by whomever wishes to seek funding for them. They'll remain hidden until they're evaluated. We'll have a couple of things that need to be evaluated. One of them is if you're submitting a project on somebody else's property, we need to know that somebody else has been contacted about said project, right? We can't list a project on public land where the public landowner hasn't been notified that somebody wants to do this. So there'll be a couple of sorting hats in there, and we can allow folks to
That's kind
come
of
back
funny
and
that you're getting suggestions about projects that people haven't okayed yet.
yeah, and there was a lot of pushback on that, understandably.
Yeah, I mean, I
from
can
the
imagine.
folks who were like, what the
It's sort of
heck?
funny when you think about it.
I don't know anything about this, right? So, and there can be difficult ramifications for that from the property owner or manager. So that needs to be sort of, so that's one of the things we'll be looking for is whose property is this on, and can the submitter prove that they have in fact spoken to the landowner about it. So there'll be, some, but by and large, what we're looking for is like, what do people want to do and where do they want to do it? We got a lot of feedback that entering projects was too laborious. So what we're doing is trying to make that a much easier process. We may also end up with a separate project entry portal that has a lot more room for exactitude. And exactly how we would judge, projects that are completed, so those would be CEQA is either started or at least you know how to spell it. You have a budget, you have a time frame, you have, everything that you kind of need to write a grant. So there might also be a portal for people to enter those complete projects too, to have those listed in the CWPP. And I would guess that people who might enter those, we could use it for if, say, Kim needs to throw out another request for proposals for his program, we can use that portal to drop in all of those grant applications. So it could be built specifically for a program or for people who have a project which they submitted for funding, which was rejected, but they've done all the work, they could throw it in there. And those completely built projects obviously have more, will have more weight than I want to do this and this is all I know. So that's what we'll be really working on building. There'll be an evaluation of all those projects, which will be by actual humans. A consortium of folks from as many perspectives as we can get in a room at one time, who will have expertise in the environmental side, the forestry side, the outreach side, the project management side, so that projects can be looked at pretty globally for feasibility. And what this will provide us, we're hoping, is a countywide map of projects that are ideas in people's minds, projects that have been submitted and are in implementation, projects that have been submitted and completed. Do these projects address, are these large scale fuels management projects, or are they projects that address near home and defensible space? We can identify that. Education projects will go in as points on the map as opposed to, so if you want to, I want to write a document that says how to do everything. That's not going to have Sonoma County as the project area. It's going to be a point at a central point on the map. And those will be tied to the project too. So I think that the original project entry portal, this is new ground. People don't usually do this like this in most places. So That was the beta version, and there were things that didn't work that we're going to fix. And so that's going to be the next round. And then this evaluation committee will, I think, end up having a lot of awesome expertise. And that's going to be, I think, helpful towards moving the boat along on the implementation side on a broader basis. The CWPP itself, the HFRA, the Healthy Forest Restoration Act, where the CWPP is described, only asks that a CWPP is collaboratively developed. It identifies and prioritizes areas for hazardous fuels treatment and recommends measures to reduce structural ignitability. Those are the only three things that the CWPP has to do. And so we have tried as much as we can to use the CWPP to help educate folks, but stay within the lane of what the CWPP is supposed to do. Comments were extensive and long. There were a lot of comments in this version expressing enormous concern about any fuel breaks, any work done outside of the 100-foot zone, which, you know, it's a CWPP. It's supposed to prioritize methods for treatment, and fuel breaks are one of them. So we're still talking about fuel breaks. And we've addressed and modified comments according to applicability to the standards of the HFRA. Sorry, that was really long. Any questions?
I have a couple. Are the public comments going to be made public so we can review them at some point? And then I'm really happy to hear about the map and wonder, you know, what the timeline is for developing such a map. And there was another question I can't remember.
The map is, we're hoping to have that in January.
Oh, great.
I'm being kind of optimistic there, I think. So
Yeah.
it might be a little after that. And what we will be doing, and this is where this is super important for this group. As soon as we have that done, I'll pop off an email to Adriana and everybody else that says, it's time to put your projects in the portal. Because we're hoping to take the plan to the board for signature on February 28th. And we are going to be linking to the hub site for the projects in the CWPP. We will be trying to port projects that were entered last year into there as we can. And those will be ones for whom we know there's not a divergent property owner or whatever. But we'll be trying to enter those in, but we also will be sending out emails to everybody who entered projects last year to ask if they want to have their project evaluated for inclusion in this year. And the time frame is really, really tight, which circles around my grant funding, which I need to get this done. And February 28th is the last possible day that I can get the signatures on it. So we're kind of, it's going to be a little, it's going to be hard getting it in, but we'll get there. But if you get that email from us saying, please enter your projects, please enter your projects. And really, it should be pretty easy to do that on the hub site. So
You said there were two buckets. I only wrote down that you said something about an easy entry bucket. And what was the second one?
A more complicated, complete project.
Okay.
Carleon, I want to just kind of recognize all the amazing effort that you put into this. And I think we should get to that point where perfection is the evil of really, really good. I mean, this is a really comprehensive document. I think our tendency for something like this is to overthink it and just we've had sufficient amount of public input. The positive of that is at least people are reading it. So I'm really excited that we are getting feedback, but I really hope we can just kind of push on and get this thing done, signed, sealed, and delivered, and you can sleep better at night. And I really want to just recognize what a great effort you've done to keep this thing moving along.
Yeah, it's, I never would have thought that I would end up writing the CWPP on my own time again, but
Jesus.
so yeah, public comments, we're kind of deciding how we're gonna do that. We may just end up posting the public draft with the comments in them. And then other comments that we got via email or other ways. That's what I'm trying to figure out. I might just put a spreadsheet up. The public draft with the comments in that were entered into the public draft is on the website right now. So you can go look at that if you want.
Here's a question I gotta ask. I love the CWPP. It's been an amazing tool to get these projects on the list. Now, when we separate the list, it's whether they're CEQA ready or not, right? Whether the project is shovel ready or not has been an obstacle. Is that still the case?
No, not at all. You may have a CEQA ready project in the hard bucket. The easy bucket, I would hope that you know that there is such a thing as CEQA and you can spell it, but we are not expecting that those projects have CEQA underway. What we want to do with those easy bucket projects is start to perform. By making it an easy bucket, we're hoping to get more ideas thrown in onto this map, so that when we as a group look at the county to prioritize where and what we want to do to reduce risk, we can look at the map and we can say, yeah, there aren't any projects over there in that corner. So we will do a gap. Let me rephrase that. We'll do a gap and trend analysis. So we'll be looking for this evaluation committee. We'll be looking for where are there areas where there are 7 projects doing exactly the same thing in a very similar footprint. Can we get these people together? Can we turn this into a really strong mega proposal that then we can, move forward? So that will be one thing we can do with that easy bucket stuff. The other thing we can do is go, whoa, here's a really good idea, but these guys clearly need some help to develop this idea. So then we can push those folks over to Open Space or Fire Safe Sonoma, who may have capacity to help them develop projects. We can also use it to look at the trends, right? Are there 59 large-scale fuels management projects and nothing that's investing in addressing defensible space and structure hardening, which is highly likely because that's a much heavier lift, frankly. And then we can sort of start to, so who do we contact to create projects that are addressing the gaps, right? So that's the whole idea of the easy button, is we want stuff in there so that we can then use that to more precisely encourage the development of highly effective projects across the county landscape at risk.
Sounds great. Sounds great. It's just, when you look at the cost of the permitting and how much that absorbs getting to implementation, that was kind of the root of my question there. But I think it's the tool that you've got is so wonderful to just get all this stuff on the board and then figure out where we go from there. So anyways,
yeah, the cost of the permitting and the regulatory challenges, that's outside of the scope of the CWPP. Right?
Okay.
I know that regulatory challenges are a challenge. I know that as well as anybody, I would say.
Yeah.
Especially because I'm dealing with NEPA now. You guys don't know how lucky you are. So would the idea of easing regulatory compliance conflicts be a project? Maybe. Maybe that's a project that needs to be entered, for which we will seek funding and try to find somebody to help us move that down along the line. But the CWPP itself doesn't resolve those issues. It brings them up, and do we need a project for that? someone do it. So that's kind of where there's a line between policy and project.
Carleon, what if somebody is just, you know, really not paying attention, but then want to pay attention? So how would new projects get in after February 28th?
I'm guessing that this year we're going to end up having 2 entry dates. And we'll see in the future, do we have only one? Get your project idea in by this date, because this committee meets once a year and we will only meet once a year to evaluate. This year, since this is new, I think clearly we will need a couple of rounds. So we'll be, you know, posting those dates on the hub site, and we need to build some tracking methodology so that we can develop an email list that can automatically send out and notify everybody who wants to be on that email list of the upcoming dates. Exactly how that'll work in the future, I'm not sure. My guess is, you know, for the committee, it might work best once a year, but it could be that where the rubber hits the road, people need 2 days a year. You'll be able to enter that project onto the list, but it won't be evaluated until the evaluation committee meets. And yeah, that's going to be a deadline.
Right, and that's good, but that they can be entered. For example, if someone sees it, all of it, and they see the map and they see the gaps, somebody might want to, oh, I better, you know, let's do one here.
Right,
I think that's one of the
and that will
things.
remain hidden until such point as it is evaluated by the committee.
I
Okay,
think one of the ideas is that, you know, this should be a living document. You know, we get the real nuts and bolts about how we're addressing wildfire in the county, but we also wanted to continue to
That's what I thought.
evolve. And so that the idea would be to target dates, entry dates to be corresponding to when CAL FIRE's forest health grants are available, or fire prevention, and try to really think through when we should be getting projects. Because, you know, deadlines are what motivate a lot of people. We don't want people to be doing this 24 hours before the deadline. We want people to really be thoughtful about these and develop these things with a good anticipation of time. And so by having those 2 deadlines, it gets people thinking about it. If they miss the deadline, that's their problem. But I think the idea is that once it gets into the portal, we as the evaluation committee and the tax and so forth will be able to start thinking and brainstorming about, oh, yeah, this is ideal for a fire prevention grant, you know, and that's on a landowner basis. Or we can think of more creatively, how does this fit into the FEMA grants or FEMA funding that's coming down the pipe? So those are kind of the ideas behind all that.
Yeah,
And
good.
the idea of the CWPP as defined in the Health Forest Restoration Act was exactly to do this process, right? What we're really need to discourage is what I call the Texas bullseye grant writing approach, which is that a grant comes up to provide Kevlar vests for deer, and you suddenly go, oh, my deer need Kevlar vests. And in 15 minutes, you write a grant that has not been prioritized or considered on a more global basis. And that was one of the things that the Healthy Forest Restoration Act was attempting to line up. Because the federals, when they put this together, the problem they were having was they were funding projects that had been submitted by entities who hadn't spoken to those projects with the local neighbors, the communities, yada, yada, yada. And so they would fund the project, but the project would fall apart in the implementation stage because it hadn't been prioritized or collaboratively considered. And so that's what they were after. And I truly, truly do see the need for that procedure. And yeah, there's going to be some gnashing of teeth, and people are going to miss the deadline, and my project's not in the CWPP, and that's why we'll do two entries this year, I'm guessing.
Okay.
But that is what it's for, and it's not built to allow you to do a Texas bullseye project.
Yeah.
Even though your deer are at risk.
And those 2 entries are after February 28th?
we're not exactly sure yet. We will be, we'll send out an email as soon as we're ready to
Okay.
get projects in. It's going to, it's a fairly heavy lift for our GIS team, but I will get it done as quickly as we can.
Yeah.
With the caveat that we expect the process to modify and change over time, like Ken said. That's
Yeah.
what we can do that here.
Yeah.
We can do that. This is a living document. This is a living process, which is being informed by use.
Yeah, I brought that up that it's a living document at a meeting last week, and I was told no, and so I'm really glad for clarification.
It is the reason that there's it's very easy to change the appendices for a plan, which is why I used to leave the project entry portal in the appendices, right? Very easy to change the appendix. The plan itself is signed. I
Right.
have been told by one person who should know that no, you can modify it anytime you want. I'm not absolutely positive of that, so I'm not going to say that because it's signed by the board. And how do we get in and change something that's signed without telling them? But you know, the appendices are very easily updated and modified.
Okay.
So we can add modifications. We can, if we want to change the project priority list, we throw in an appendix that says these project priorities have been modified. Here's the new project priorities. So it is very modifiable.
Thank you so much, Caroline, for that update. That was really, really important to hear. And I'm glad that you have put this all on our radar again, so that we know that soon we're going to be tasked with putting in our projects. I'm sure everyone's going to do a great job of putting them in. And yeah, I'm excited for this future in which we are all coordinated. That's going to be huge.
I'm pretty excited
Yeah.
that we figured that out, right? How do we do that? How do we do that? Because I'll tell you, most of the plans that I know of, they were done by an entity. And they said, here are the projects and here are the priorities of those projects. And those weren't necessarily projects that were entered by the community themselves. That's the secret sauce. That's the different thing that we're doing here. And in a county as contentious and polarized as Sonoma County, that's very, very difficult to do. And so swimming through that sea of polarization it's going to be complicated and difficult, but I think this is a huge step forward.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. Okay, great. Let's see if in the next 10 minutes we can get all of our updates finished. We have Jason, Brooke, and Ron. So maybe I'll start with Ron.
There we go. Yeah, I'm just tuning in. I'm a little late here, but I'm thinking about how we take one project at a time, one landowner at a time, but it's really nice when you get a group of landowners that have contiguous property, and it's so much easier to do a landscape-wide plan. And it's kind of like a homeowners association, there's always somebody who doesn't agree with everybody. But I've talked to a couple of our supervisors about this, they'd love that to happen, to get like a group of people that all agree on, we're going to do this project and it's going to involve this. And I don't know, what do you think? Jason Wells, he does the timbers, the hard work of it. And in Adriana, the RCDs is what I know. And how do you feel about those? Is that possible? Do you think we can coordinate and get like everyone to agree to it's like a landscape size plan? I know we've done it in national forests in areas where there's large tracts, but where there's a lot of individual landowners, we have so many accounts to deal with, and it's like the counting of each project is time consuming, and it'd be nice if this is more of an idea than an update, because we are losing our executive director and our accountant for the Sonoma RCD. So there's going to be a little bit, I hope we don't change very much, but next year we're going to have a new captain for the ship, so to speak, at Sonoma RCD. And at least, we got our neighbor agencies that are still, but we do this. Let's face it, every 10, 20 years, there's got to be somebody moving on,
You guys have a strong crew, so.
Yeah. Yeah, we got so many resources. I hate to waste them. And it sure be nice if we had a folder that had everybody in, say, this one watershed, that they all want to do one thing. And I've mentioned that to a couple of our supervisors that, yeah, they'd like that too. And Carleone probably knows about this, but it would be nice if we had a one size fits several, not all, but several. That's it. That's about all I got.
Thanks, Ron. And Jason can chime in on this, but yes, he has been working on multi-property plans. And I think you kind of nailed it on the head with saying it's sort of like an HOA in which there's like some consensus building that happens. And, yeah, exactly. It's not one size fits all. It's like, here's generally what we're doing. And if you want to diverge a little bit, you can, but we're all sort of going together anyway. I'm being vague, but yeah, it's so far we've had some good success setting up a reasonable number of landowners in a group forest management plan. And I think, yeah, it's the way of the future, getting people to work together and having neighborhood leaders and working with foresters to educate forest
I know Judy's been doing a lot of work out on the coast there. Getting people together.
Yeah.
Got to speak the dialects they have,
Yes.
And Ron, you and I, we should speak, we should talk and figure out, I know I want to, bring Jason into this too with your grant, Jason, but yeah, we should all talk and figure out, I mean, we're reaching out to the same people and just kind of, make a plan accordingly.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say, I think that to sort of answer your question about, do I think that this is possible? I mean, yes. Is it probable? The jury's out, right? Like, we're going to try to do this sort of thing. And I think it's going to depend on having these neighborhood champion people like Judy, right? And like having for each community, figuring out how they can self-identify in a way that's actually meaningful in order to do the work, whether or not they're a sub-watershed group or a road group or however best fits for them. And, it's hard to say because I just don't think that it's going to be a one size fits all box for any of this. I think it's probably going to have to be more like a custom hot rod every time you go out there and try and figure out how are we going to put this together. I mean, in a way, thankfully, there's not that many tools. So you can really only have the discussion about like, okay, here are the tools available. This is how you would do something like this. And you can start with that conversation of what are you going to do? You're going to graze it. You're going to cut it down. You're going to, use fire or use herbicide. Boom. There are all the tools. So it's just about educating people, making sure that people can get on the same page. But yeah, it's going to be different every time, and I don't really know. So we've got a couple different pilot programs, pilot projects, or whatever that we're trying to work with a few different groups, and it's going to be different every time. And yeah, so I would love to have a big shelf that has, there's a map that shows you where people have sort of created these identified boundaries and that there's a phone tree and a way to communicate with people, and that they each individually have, verbally agreed with one another or to work on a certain, shared priority that fits within their own personal goals. But also understanding that there's a community aspect to it and that we're trying to repair a landscape. It's probably at this point, it seems very aspirational, but that's what we're working on. So I'm hoping that one day we can have that So
Jason and all that are, and Ron and let's see, somebody else that was working on these. Oh, and Judy, let's not forget the Diamond Mountain Mark West collaborative effort up on the in the Upper Mark West Creek watershed as a group, a community group that got a grant, working on it. And I know they are probably one of the newish groups, but they could learn a lot, and certainly they have things to teach others. So if you are getting together, please include them.
yeah, I mean, I wasn't meaning to call out individual groups, right?
Right. No, I know that. I was just,
But that's the sort of thing that's going to happen on a watershed by watershed or a planning area by planning area basis. If you just think about it like this, I mean, like, if I were to guess what I think a reasonable planning area is going to be, it's going to be somewhere in the 10,000 acre range, right? And then there's 1 million acres in Sonoma County. So if you just think about it that way, when you do this 100 times, and then that covers the whole the whole county, right? Isn't that right? 10,000 times 100, that's 1 million. So I think something like that. So that's kind of how I'm envisioning one day. And I mean, it's tough because some of the people who are out there, they own property out in the boonies because they didn't want to talk to any of their neighbors, right? We're going to have real conflicts of interest, of personal beefs, clashes. I mean, like, it's, so I think fire in a sense is a unifying front, right? That people are all concerned about this sort of thing for, their health and safety, and they all care about their properties. And so, I think that's probably going to be our best bet for actually creating some kind of discussion tool. And there are tools that are already available for starting this sort of thing. I mean, I think that, like, just starting with COPE groups is a great way to organize these kinds of things, right? Like, get the phone tree, make sure that people know who lives where, figure out how we're going to deal with absentee landowners, right? So that's like another component that we're going to have to try and figure out. And I don't think it's going to be done tomorrow. So that's another thing too. Like, all of this is going to take place over the next 20, 30 years.
oh no.
I suspect. That's what I would think. I don't think it's going to get done in 5. I don't think we're going to be, ready to go with all these things, but maybe I'm just a forester. I have a long-term vision, and I don't think
you really helped me put
Yeah.
An exclamation point on we can do it, because if we have 100 projects that are 10,000 acres and that's the whole county, that's only 100 projects. Come on, let's, I mean, that's putting it in perspective, and I really appreciate that, because that sounds more doable.
Well, I think that the thing about it is that some of these things we're going to have to work with who wants to work with us, right? And then you're going to end up having situations where you worked with people and you have something to show for it. And then you have something that other people start seeing. There's funding, there's a way, they see it and they like it, right? And then I think that that's going to help, but it might take a while. And maybe 20 years is being conservative. Hopefully it's being conservative, but I certainly don't want to be the kind of person who's going to say, like, oh, we're going to get this all done in the next 10 years. I just think that it's a lot of work. And who knows, because that's the thing, like, we could try it one way and it's going to be different for every group. Like, we have one group of landowners that we recently worked with, and it was 400 acres and 100 and some odd landowners, right? So it's going to be a very different, and that's about all we can handle. So it's not going to be 10,000 acres for some of these landowners, but when you're out in Geyserville, you can make that work for sure. Or if you're out in Kaz, you can work on that because you know people who own a couple hundred acres, and everybody knows for the most part who lives where. And so you start that phone tree and you end up actually having a pretty significant amount of area. You know, start tying in the fact that there's timber companies and stuff out in Wallala, and those are pretty large land bases. So sometimes we're gonna be able to capture a bigger than 10,000, but sometimes it's gonna be, I think, a slog. So
I like what you said, Jason, about working on scales that are meaningful, right? Like what was a meaningful group, and how do people feel associated to each other? Because that's how they're gonna want to work together. So yeah.
yeah, and I'll just make that my update.
Yeah, Jason, our immediate project area right now is 6,500 acres. And that doesn't include Timber Cove. It doesn't include Odeon and Rotnaling who want to get involved, and the Richardson Ranch who wants to be involved, and Kashaya who wants to be involved. So I think, you know, right now we're working on 6,500 acres, and for Forest Health, we're going to expand, I think, beyond that 10,000 acres with the other properties that I just mentioned. And we will be having an outreach meeting in January to talk about this project. And we should talk about if you want to come and start doing some, you know, first steps, just kind of introducing what you're doing. I mean, some of these people know you already from our past project. So, you know, that's a huge step in earning trust of the people here. And so we can talk about this more later, but I certainly, you know, would like to involve you in that.
Yeah, there's other landowners like Cooley. He has 20,000, and then there's the Sonoma Valley project they've been working on that has got, what are that, 50, 60,000 acres of various public land. So anyway, it'd be fun to put that together sometime. I'd like to put it on the agenda in January, just kind of think tank brainstorm how many projects of that size we already know. I think that would be really inspirational. I'd like to add that to the agenda, Adriana.
Yep, got it.
Yeah, just a historical note here is a while back, the NRCS wanted to make a pitch to the tribes, you know, up north, you know, Humboldt, Siskiyou, Trinity and all that. And I met several elders of the tribes, and they said, back in the old days when we controlled it, they didn't have surveyed boundaries. Each tribe pretty much owned a watershed. They took care of their watershed. And that included their drinking water, their sacred sites, their timber management, the whole thing they did. And they says, we had it under control until you invaders came in and had rules. And I thought, you know, they really didn't want all the NRCS help that was offered to them, because they didn't want to be told how to do their work. And of course, they don't have the resources. And it just seems like we should go back to like looking at the watersheds. And if you're in the watershed, well, you know, Mark West is a watershed, and there's little mini watersheds all over the place. Everybody has a stake in that watershed. Wait till fire comes. There's only one road out or two roads out. You know, look at Paradise. You know, it's like one watershed, and or two watersheds, but only one way out. And I think we've been going at it sort of like timber harvest oriented management. And you know, PG&E, I know I hate to say this, but they've been getting away with no CEQA, no, they just do whatever they want because everybody wants the power. And I think we're all trying to readjust.
I was just going to say timber harvest, that's done by watershed. So, yeah. I mean,
well, that's a good idea. But I mean, when the methods that they do is like, hey, we need so many board feet, and those days are pretty much gone, but that's what led us to where we're at now.
All right, I have to thank you, Ron. I'm just gonna put it over to Brooke because he hasn't given his update yet. And then I think we will be done with updates, and we'll be able to go on to the second part.
Good morning, everyone. Lots of great information, great updates. Just a quick couple things from regional parks. So a number of us from parks is taking part in the North Bay Treks, which is the training exchange for learning about how to use prescribed fire. And so recently we've been able to do a burn at the Grove of Old Trees up on Fitzpatrick, which is very interesting, putting fire into a mature old growth redwood forest that really hasn't burned for quite a while. And then also up on Monan's Rill, we burned some quite large burn piles, if you can call them that, 20 feet by 60 feet. Lots of material up there. So that was a great experience. And the lesson learned there is you want the ground and everything around you to be really wet when you light off a pile that's that big and has that many BTUs, coming off of it. Also, we're working towards, we're getting closer to signing an agreement with ACR and Sasha Berlman to be able to be a burn boss and to boss burns on regional parks. So that has been in the process for really years now. And so that's a huge milestone that we're about there. And that means that we'll start to have spring and fall burns, hopefully on a routine basis within the parks. So that's great information. Let's see what else. We're also moving forward, continuing with our VTP for Shiloh and Foothill Regional Parks. Hopefully that will be done first quarter of next year. And that will dovetail nicely with being able to bring Sasha on and start burning some units within those parks. That's about it from me. Looking forward to seeing some of you tonight over at La Rosa.
Woohoo! Great. Congratulations on that. That's so exciting. All right, great. I think we're ready to go on to the next part. Sorry, I was expecting more conversation. But I guess we have to stop at some point. So I'm gonna put in a link.
Well, let me, conversation, one more, not so fast, can't get to the agenda yet. I think one thing is how this all, just want to throw it out there on circle and tack, right? As we're going into all these sites and starting to get more resources to do active land management, I think one thing we should really consider is building in a pre-existing data set, right? To log the state of the vegetation before work is done, right? Like I'm thinking that burn brook you're doing in old growth up there, like that could have some really cool results compared to say a roadside mastication project that ends up in more biomass 5 years after treatment, right? So I would just love to see us do something like that so we can start gauging the effectiveness of our work, right? Just had to get that out there.
Okay, interesting you say that because yeah, I've been thinking about the same thing. And it's something that we're going to be testing out in one of our RCD programs, pre and post project fuel loading, and kind of estimating like expected fire behavior before the project and after the project, and to see how that has changed. I think that would be a really big kind of metric, or just a bit of data for us to have about our projects countywide. We're still developing the methodology for that, but when we come up with something and we try it out a couple times, we'll let you know if it's any good.
Are you suggesting, you guys, that a baseline would be good to have, and we don't have one yet? And I think that's an excellent idea. And certainly then to monitor the effects when a fire does come through on the projects that have been completed. I mean, that's going to be key to adaptive management. So anyway, I really support that.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the public lands that have the resources to do constant vegetation management and constant vegetation maintenance, they have to have a metric to gauge their crew's effectiveness. Right. So I first heard about it on MMWD, they've got tons of resources on TAM. They want to know, hey, are we going into intact habitat where there is no invasive species present? And then when we're done, did we introduce a whole bunch of broom through this work,
Right, exactly. No, it's excellent.
Okay, cool. That's interesting. I was thinking about it from a fire perspective, but yeah, there's a number of things to be monitoring before and after projects. So for sure, I'll take a holistic approach. Okay. All right. So I have put for you a link to our draft program for the conference. And, you know, we only have 15 minutes. And I think that's okay because I really just wanted to sort of like go through, you know, just review it with you guys and take kind of like your initial feedback on how it looks. But if you want to spend more time with it, you guys can stay on it. You have commenting privileges on that document. So if you want to add some comments on things you like or things you'd want to change, feel free to do that.
Can you take 5 minutes and just do a executive summary?
Sure. So yeah, so you guys, this is a new document. The one that you're familiar with is longer and you know, it's a messier version of this, but basically it's all the same kind of information. But I just kind of cleaned it up and put it into a new doc. So this one looks more like an agenda. So it kind of tells you like the timetable for what we'd be doing on day 1 and day 2 of this conference. This is all draft, so don't think that things can't change. So day 1, Shown Farm, we'll be having breakout sessions pretty much all day. The beginning of the day starts with some kind of opening remarks and presentations. The first 3 items I borrowed from our previous conference agenda from 2017. So if that looks familiar, that's why I just basically cut and paste. I was like, I did it before, they could do it again, hopefully. And it still sounds good to me. So yeah, day starts off with conference welcome and kind of intention setting from our working group members and maybe Supervisor Gore. Moving into welcome to Santa Rosa Junior College, a site of abundant forest conservation and education activities. And then hopefully, you know, if we involve them sooner than later, we can also hear from, you know, a member of one of the tribes and, you know, get their take on what is the, you know, value of this conference. And then from there on, the agenda is broken out into 40-minute breakout sessions. I am kind of just like seeing how that looks on the agenda. 40 minutes would give us 30 minutes for the actual session and then 10 minutes to move to the next session between sessions. And so what you see if you keep scrolling down is that we've got multiple tracks happening at the same time. So, you know, for the first breakout session, or for every breakout session, you decide what presentation you want to attend based on the track. And so you can see we got an education track, planning track, projects, and collaboration. I also kind of thought it would be maybe fun to rename those learning, planning, doing, collaborating, maybe, but that's the essence of them. And then you can see the topics that are listed for each of those tracks, starting with, at least my intention was kind of like starting with sort of like the most broad topic and then getting more narrow or getting more advanced as we go through the track. So you can see the education track starts with the presentation that was suggested by Ryan to talk about forests as a process, what is senescence and secession. Then Tori had suggested introduction to fire in California. Devin wrote up something about traditional ecological knowledge. So this is kind of like really setting the scene of where we're at. And then Kim has Sonoma fire history. How has the county changed? Jason and Ellie's, after that, Jason and Ellie's handbook of principles and practices for vegetation management. And then these last 3, this is Devin's, looking into the impacts that thinning and burning has on watershed, water and watershed dynamics. And then these last 2 haven't been drafted yet, but I thought that they are complementary, which is what are the impacts of forest health and forest treatments on wildlife. And then lastly, workforce development programs, of which we have many with the junior college and other partners. So those were kind of the topics that came to the top for me in the list that we have been developing. And I think they work pretty well together. If you guys feel like there's something else that's missing, please let me know. Or if, I also was thinking about how we could combine different things to be more succinct. We've got an open slot here for another one if there feels like there's something else that should be added. And then next is the planning track. So I think this was one I wrote. It's a combination of two, which I might want to break out, but it combines how to work with a forester and developing a forest management plan. So we might want those to be separate, or they could be together. And then next is introduction to working with agencies and accessing project support. So this is like, what is NRCS? What is NRCD? What is CAL FIRE? And we have reps from each. And then intro to incentives programs. So all the different kind of like incentive funding programs that are out there and how people can access them. Then wildfire fuel mapper and wildfire resilience planner. This is Sashi wrote this one up to make people aware of these resources. The wildfire fuel mapper is already out there. The wildfire resilience planner is coming soon and probably will be available to public by April. Then we had a suggestion to go through the CAL FIRE unit plans, plan goals and objectives, which I was thinking, we could have it here if it warrants it, or it could potentially be part of like our opening ceremony, maybe kind of talking about like the bigger picture goals. But for now, I've kept it here. Yeah, I guess the usefulness of that is so that people are aware that like what they do has bigger implications for our whole state and regions, like fire management goals. Then we've got a session on working with PG&E and utilities. So this is going to be a really hot topic one. I'm sure lots of people would like help for addressing their concerns about, PG&E's vegetation management program. Next is working with insurance companies. How can people, address their issues there? And then finally, some context about project permitting with CEQA or NEPA, and if we can touch on the CalVTP. So we've got an open space here for another subject that we need to put in there. And projects track. So I thought I'd start us off. I didn't really see like a clear way to organize these, but I think starting off with just kind of like a basic, like how and why to integrate grazing into your forest management approach. Next is how and why to integrate prescribed fire into your forest management approach. Next is shaded fuel breaks, purpose and practices. Devin wrote up a great session for us on pile burning and how it can have multiple benefits. There's a suggestion about talking about biomass processing, which I think is great, looking at appropriate practices and all the different technologies that are out there, and what's appropriate for your site. Definitely want to have something on invasive plant management, forest pest and pathogen management. And then here's a session on post-fire, considerations. Super important. I wasn't sure if I wanted to put that up towards the top or the bottom, so we can move it around however feels good to you guys.
I just threw in the abstract I did for CNPS, I think into that one there, vegetation management considerations and implications. So happy to lead that one. And then let me know if you want me to reach out to invasive plant experts from Cal IPSI to try to pull them in,
Yeah, I would just say yes, please do.
that might be nice.
Great. Yeah. And then okay.
Yeah, I would like to suggest that we talk about having the people that are having concerns about treatments have some participation. It would be certainly with some caveats that it be done in a very professional, positive intention way. but I think their voices need to be heard by us and others. And so I'm proposing that we discuss that possibility somewhere in the conference. And on a whole nother note, I think we need to have music, humor, and fun somehow written into every day. And are we going to do the awards like we have been talking about?
Okay, I'll start at the end. So awards, yes, those are going to be during the what is it called? The end of the the evening, the catered reception.
Okay.
And then humor, definitely. D, that's your department, so I'm charging you with that one. And then what was the first question again?
Well, music and fun and humor, but also to have have the considered concerns about treatments. I think that it's a big enough piece of our puzzle in Sonoma County and other ways that it's a respectable way to have a more full array of ideas.
Do you think that could be its own session, or do you see it being integrated some other way?
I don't know yet. I just thought I would bring it up for further consideration at a conference planning meeting.
Okay, sounds good. I'm going to put it on. I'll just put it on the top.
And when is the next conference meeting?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. I can't say right now, but I will let you know. I think our Wednesdays around 2:30 have been working pretty well, but I don't think that we'll have another one until January.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Okay.
tentatively the first Wednesday in January.
Are we having any site visits?
Yeah, I still thank you for everyone's suggestions about what field trips we would want to take and speakers we want to hear from. I have yet to reach out to them, but I think it's very likely that in the early part of next year we'll be doing field trips. Yeah. Are you talking about for the conference or in general?
I am talking about the conference, and I'm
Oh.
talking specifically about going to Arts and Ecology Center, who have this stellar project and has so many aspects, and it's been such a long time that they've been doing it. So if we're going to have them, I think we better discuss them at our next meeting and try to line them up.
That's a great idea. Yeah. Yeah, I have it at the very bottom of the agenda. We've got the day 2 field trips, and why don't we skip to that now? So day 2, we'd all meet at Schoen, and then I was kind of imagining, since Schoen is itself such a great site, that we might start the day with just kind of doing a tour of their projects. And Fred was also saying, like, maybe we could even do like a small, like a burn pile or a small unit prescribed fire that morning. I don't know how it's hard to plan something like that and know that it'll happen for sure. But yeah, I was thinking we could start the day at Schoen, and then in the afternoon we could have different field trips. So we could have the 2 site suggestions that kept coming up were Pepperwood and Saddle Mountain, which I think is kind of neat because they're like kind of in distinct. I haven't been to Saddle Mountain, but I feel like they're in distinct enough areas that they speak to different ecosystems. But we could do a 3rd track, which is to go to Occidental Arts and Ecology Center, or some other 3rd site. So I'm gonna just pop that in there now so that I don't
I
forget
always
it.
thought it'd be cool to delineate them by, oh, sorry, Jill, just real quick, preventative work, pre-fire, and then post-fire.
Jason, are you saying that you want to see pre and post fire on a field trips?
Well, I think OEAC would be perfect for pre-fire,
Okay.
right? And then that Saddle Mountain Pepperwood is more post-fire conditions, right?
Good point. Yes, Jill.
Yeah. So two things I'm working on for field trips, and I apologize that I haven't filled out my forms for Adriana. Steve and Jason Mills and I have had a conversation or two about doing a field trip that's a tools demonstration. And Steve has gotten an agenda drafted, and Jason and Adriana will be in touch with you and get that information to you. And I think we would probably just do that at Shown. And then I've talked to Judy when we ran into each other in Duncan's Mills one afternoon about one that would be a community forest one, looking at work that has been done by Coast Ridge and Jenner Headlands.
That's awesome, Jill. Thank you so much. I didn't know you were doing that in the background, and I love the idea of a tools demo, because that's something that we had talked about putting into day one, and we're like, oh, there's just too much going on. But I think you're right. That would fit really well if people want to stay at Shown and do that instead of going off into a field trip. And then the community forest, kind of, going to Coast Ridge and seeing some of the work that you guys have been doing up there, I think would be really, really good.
One thing
And I'll get right up to you.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
And Jill, we can talk about this too. I did a great trip out there to the Jenner Headlands, showing off their masticator. And if we wanted to combine, we could do Jenner Headlands equipment, and then we're working with Muna's Ranches. They're on our project right now. And then they're they're adjacent to each other. That could be a community forest. And we're working with the Headlands combined trip of tools, equipment, and project. Just throwing it out there.
That would all go great. And we'd like to hear about your chipper program too.
Yes. And we could do that as well. Because we're using it in multiple areas out there. So anyway, I know we're running out of time, so we can talk about this, Jill, and later.
Very good. Thank you.
This is so great. Thank you. Awesome. So like you said, go ahead and look through this a little more, drop in notes. The last section we didn't go over was the collaboration track, which is kind of like talking more about, exactly that multi-property forest management. I wanted to highlight a couple properties, Coast Ridge, Joywoods, potentially whoever else feels inspired to talk from their personal experience about collaborating as a larger group. Because I think having these kind of like highlighted communities is really inspirational to the landowners who are attending the conference. And then, how do they get funding? How do they share equipment, grazing animals, tools, that kind of thing? Here is the slot for talking about, scaling up across the region. And then Sashi had a great, kind of closing thought, which is just like, how do all these things fit together with the state, regional, county, and local plans and efforts. And then in the evening, like I said, we'll have a break for the Resource Expo, which is really just like letting people mill around all the different agencies and organizations that are going to be tabling and handing out resources. And then we'll move to the catered reception, which will have, food, and it'll be less structured. And then we'll have some keynote speakers, and finally the award ceremony. So I feel like this is in a good spot. There's still a lot left to coordinate. So I'm going to be, organizing more planning meetings for us so that we can get really fine tune the details. I'm feeling pretty good about the speaker sessions, and I'm going to be working more kind of like individually with with the people who drafted those to reach out to the speakers and like finalize their descriptions, but I don't want to take a whole lot more of our group time on that. I'd like to move, more towards the field trips and the other elements, like who to invite as keynote speaker, what kind of food we want to eat. Not just kidding. Nominating people for the award ceremony. There's a couple other time sensitive things that I don't have at the tip of my tongue right now, but there's a lot still to do. So I'm really happy we've gotten this far, but now we need to keep pushing. Especially since we have, the other thing is I really want to get this to landowners and start to get landowner feedback, because, we've sort of devised this internally, but I want to make sure this is a program that is enticing to landowners, that they're actually going to want to come and attend. So getting your all thoughts on like what landowners might be willing to give feedback to this. I want to get in touch with them soon. And then finally, we need to advertise it. Hopefully we'll be advertising by end of January, at latest. So that was a lot. But
I think that we could consider what we've done in the past, and that is to have videos of, like we had Jared Huffman on a video, just congratulating us and encouraging us, etc. So I'd like to put that on the list for the future meeting of the conference committee. And I think tribal music would be lovely. I know that Craig is lovely, and I'm not saying not to have him, but let's think of how to round out, our music. It's an important component of, having a cohesive, getting everything together.
Land Pass has another gentleman, I'm drawing a blank on his name, Omar Gagardo. And he does tribal dancing, has a troupe that does that. And so maybe that could complement kind of more of a traditional folk music that Craig does. Just an idea.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, well, that's awesome. And we'll have to get in touch with them soon. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, guys. We'll keep this going at the next one.
See you tonight, this afternoon.
Great job. Thanks, Adriana.
One last thing before you all leave. I don't think I can make it tonight. It's a long drive. But I know that Jeremy Fisher will be there. I got an email. He's with the Forestry Collective, and he's local. His family is from, these hills, and he was born here. But his business is value-added products from small diameter timber from some of these fuel reduction projects that are going on. So I won't be there, but if you get a chance to meet him and talk to him, he'll be there tonight. And it's pretty interesting what he's doing and the award that he won, and he's local here. So, but if I can, and I get the desire for a margarita at about 4 o'clock, I'll see you tonight. Okay.
Sounds good. Great to see
Thank
you all.
Thanks, everyone. Happy
Thanks,
New
Adriana.
Year. Happy holidays.
All right.
Holidays.
Take care.
Draft schedule looks awesome. Good work.
Oh, good. Thank you. Bye.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.